Good morning, viewer. Welcome to our Fossak TV USA. Here is a breaking news from African nation Namibia. The port town has previously benefited from diamonds and fishing booms, but now struggles with high rates of unemployment and aging infrastructure. A proposed green hydrogen project is set to be the third revolution of Leuders, says Mr. Balhua, a member of the town council. He hopes that the project will train and employ local people or butchers, as they affectionately call themselves, bringing down the town's 55% unemployment rate. For a town that's really been struggling economically over the past 10 or 15, maybe longer years, this is something that people are really very excited about. He says the project will be based near the town in the Tasu Kayab National Park and ultimately produced around 3 lakh tons of green hydrogen per year. In simple terms, the renewable energy from the sun and wind will be used to separate hydrogen molecules from desalinated water. Those hydrogen molecules is in their pure form or in derivative green ammonia can make up a variety of products including sustainable fuels. The preferred vendor, Hyper Hydrogen Energy, is set to start production in 2026 and will have the rights to the project for 40 years once the necessary feasibility processes are concluded. The firm says the 4 years of construction are likely to create 15,000 direct jobs and 3,000 more during full operations, and that 90% of them will be paid by locals. Mr. James Manaifu is the Namibian government's presidential economic advisor and hydrogen commissioner. He explains that Leuders' location is ideal because of the extensive solar and wind resources and the proximity to the ocean, both as a water source and a port. Mr. Manaifu says this is all part of a plan for change in Namibia by President Hak Geingob. The president was very keen to craft an economic recovery plan that is responsive, globally relevant, and systemic in nature. This forms part of much bigger development fueled by green hydrogen that the government hopes to find funding for expanding into agriculture, logistics, and energy. Mr. Manavi seeks of green hydrogen trains and pipelines to trade with neighboring countries. There are hopes of creating renewable electricity both for export and as an alternative to imported coal from South Africa. The idea is to turn Namibia into not just a green hydrogen hub but into a synthetic fuels industry's powerhouse, he says. The impact is set to be international with agreements already signed with Germany, Belgium, and Rotterdam in the Netherlands. This comes with some funding agreements, but Namibia is looking at more options such as green or sustainable bonds towards the roughly 9.4 billion needed for the initial project. To put the size of the investment into perspective, Namibia's entire GDP in 2020 was just 10.7 billion. People could start taking us seriously as a trading partner and not a net recipient of development assistance, says Mr. Manaifu. For the ordinary Namibian, this means hope. Mr. Balhua expects that the planned influx of people and business will strengthen infrastructure in Lordage like roads and hospitals, and that the project will attract more investment from the central government into the area. But the optimism comes with matching concern. Mr. Balhua says previous large projects have not invested back into the community as hope. They are worries that the small town will not be able to meet the increased infrastructure demand, with accessible housing already being a big challenge. I do believe it's going to be a game changer not just for Namibia but for the African continent, says Kennedy Chase, a researcher and PhD candidate at the Mineral Law in Africa Research Chair, University of Cape Town. But he warns that the main challenge is financing. trying to develop renewable energy plants normally requires so much funding, and the government itself is not able to actually provide that funding through its budget. So it requires mobilizing funding from both the public sector and the private sector. Mr. Cheke says Namibia's international partnership are a positive sign. Another challenge is the amount of water that is required to produce hydrogen. Doing this through desalination, as Namibia plans to, can be expensive, as are the electrolysis process used later in the hydrogen making process. Mr. Cheche says concerned about the viability of the project and creating the kind of infrastructure needed are valid, but he is hopeful given Namibia's comparatively advantage. While several countries in Africa like South Africa, Kenya and Nigeria are developing green hydrogen plants, Namibia is the more advanced, but in terms of implementation, there has not been much progress in that regards throughout Africa. While there is much to be done, Namibia is pushing ahead, so much so that the government might announce a call for proposals for a second green hydrogen project as early as 2022. Behind the report for TV USA.